Hey, it's Twana, and welcome to the Biblical Understanding of American Politics. I'm so excited to be here with you tonight as we continue our discussions about Project 2025 and the weaponization of the Bible that's being used throughout this election and throughout this period of time. Tonight I think what we're going to do is we're going to go straight into our Bible reading and we'll go from there. See you in a second. Okay, so you'll have to forgive us whenever we have technical difficulties. John 8, 1 through 11. Jesus went unto the Mount of Olives, and early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people came unto him, and he sat down and taught them. And the scribes and Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they say unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery in the very act. Now, Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what sayest thou? This they said, tempting him, that they might have to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down, and with his finger he wrote on the ground as though he heard them not. So when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself and said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even unto the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. When Jesus had lifted up himself and saw none but the woman, he said unto her, Woman, where are those thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee? She said, No man, Lord. And Jesus said unto her, Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. Here's what we're dealing with. Right now, America has a two-party system. They have blue, which technically is the Democrats, and red, which is the conservatives. The red side has put up this agenda called Project 2025, the mandate for leadership. And this leadership mandate is supposed to be biblically based. And they have all this discussion of Christianity. They have all this discussion about what is going to be going on within the context of their reign in the US government. But the one thing they forgot is John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11. You see, let's bring that verse back up. Let's start with number 1, because there's a couple of things I want you to see. When they came unto her, when they came to him, the Pharisees arrived at Jesus with this woman. They said the woman was taken in adultery, in the very act. So what they just told you is that they walked into the bedroom where she and this man were, and they took her. Well, here's the problem. God doesn't separate male and female. If one was in the act of adultery, both are in trouble. So here's what then happens. Number 1, the man is the leader. So the person who should have been in trouble was him and not her. But they wanted to make a point. They wanted to find a way that they could make Jesus look bad. And I want you to understand that this is what the Pharisees and the Sadducees do. They want to take information that is valuable information and then they blow it up and twist it, contorting it into things that have absolutely no relevance to the conversation at hand. So when you see this distortion of truth, this is what you're dealing with. So as we go back, here's this woman that is now before him, um, and they come to him and they say what? On the next slide, we'll see exactly what they say. Well, we already know what they said, but here's what happened. So Jesus had put himself on the ground and said, "Okay, I'm on the ground. I'm gonna pretend like I don't know you. See if you'll go away." They didn't go away. He said, "Okay, fine. Which one of you is without sin? That's the person who can cast the first stone." And then he stooped down and wrote on the ground again. That was the second time. And they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even unto the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. Here's what I want you to understand: the creators of Project 2025 always talk about how they are Christian in background. But they also talk about the fact that they are Christian nationalists. And in another show, we talked about that Christian nationalism. It's serving of two gods because someone who is a nationalist is a worshiper of their country. We don't worship Earth. We don't worship our country. Our country just is what it is. It's where we happen to live. We're free to travel to whomever's country we want to travel to by the authority of the Father. We technically don't have to have passports, except that is a system that man has implemented. But in God's world, we don't have to. And I want you to understand that because many of the things that you see are things that have been brought up at a time when, let me rephrase that. Many of the things that you see are pieces of information that are being given, that are being disseminated, that are not in line with what the Father is looking at or what He has. And I really want you to understand that because when you begin to see that the Father is not a part of this, it should make pulling away from this group of people that much easier. That woman who was thrown before Jesus, he said, "Who of you haven't sinned?" I promise you, there's not a single writer of Project 2025 Mandate for Leadership who hasn't sinned. They are. And so to create a doctrine, which is now what makes this nationalism, because it has its own doctrine that is supposedly based off of the Bible, but preaches hate, separation, the hurt of the average everyday person. They propose a tax. This is interesting. In Project 2025, it tells you that there's going to be a new tax rate, and people who make under $100,000 a year, yeah, those people are going to have their taxes increased by $2,600. But people who make more than $5 million a year are going to get somewhere in the ballpark of $100 to $300,000 um, break on their taxes. Where, who are we serving with that? Are we serving the average everyday person? Because see, I don't think that we really are. And it's funny because the thing that keeps happening is that people constantly want to they constantly want to say that the poor are the problem. Jesus told us straight up from in New Testament, listen, you're always going to have the poor with you. That's a reality. We are always going to have to deal with people who are impoverished. Whether it's that the doors don't open for them, it doesn't matter what the situation is. There are always going to be people who struggle. Some do it by their choice, but others are just, they're there, right? So there's a video, it's a short that I want to show you. And it's by a gentleman by the name of Robert Reich. And I've really gotten into listening to this gentleman because what I really like about his work is that number one, he is the first link. I'm sorry, did I say link? He's the first who could clearly discuss the issues that were of concern to me because I found him while I was looking for how a way to break down the electoral college and to see if it was actually something that could really be done and no longer have to be an issue. And so what I'm going to have my assistant do who's online with me is I'm going to have her pull up that YouTube video and show you Robert Reich um, when he's talking about $163 billion in taxes that are lost because of the way that we tax the super wealthy. Anna, do you have that video?
The real freeloaders in this country are the rich, not the poor. The richest 1% evade $163 billion a year in taxes. That's taxes they owe that they just don't pay. What do you think would happen to you if you just decide not to pay your taxes? Hello? Remember,
I just love that gentleman. He makes everything so simple. And so I want you to understand this that there's a double standard when you start dealing with this type of legislation, of this type of doctrine, right? There's one standard for those who are considered the elite, and there's another standard for those who are not elite. And then they break it down based off of color. And what they do is they pretend to throw scraps at the people. And those scraps are supposed to be the thing that allows people to understand that there's an economic pie and that this economic pie is the reason that they're struggling. It's the reason that they don't have anything going for them. It's the reason that they're struggling, but the real truth is that everything is being withheld from people. And that's what the honest understanding of Project 2025 is. So what you're looking at are a group of Pharisees who have taken a woman caught in the middle of adultery and throwing her into the field or the area in front of Jesus and asking him to condemn her. So when you look at this Project 2025, here's what I want you to see. A group of Pharisees going before Jesus, throwing him a bunch of hatred for his people and saying, by the way, bless that. They're tempting him. There's no validity to this. And when you understand that there's no validity to this, what they're asking people to do is to believe a lie. And that's where so many problems are coming up with this Project 2025 is that we have too many people out there who are just drawn to the lie. And it's funny, I'm going to tell you a quick story before we move on. I had to drive through the country today and I'm in this rural area of Iowa right now. And what's really ironic is that on farmland, you see these flags flying that say Trump 2024. And these are farmers who have 5, 10, 15 acres. And you know what the sad truth is? They haven't read Project 2025. They don't even grasp that the man they are supporting, that they're throwing their support behind, wants to raise the rates of their crop insurance and take away ultimately their farmland and their livelihood. What's been in their family for 100 years will be lost because they are supporting the wrong man if the red were to win. This is a huge election. And with this election being as big as it is, what we really have to look at is whether or not we truly love, for all of its faults and all of its flaws, we truly love the country that we live in. Because if we don't, so be it. Let it go. But if you love the freedom that America gives you, the opportunity and the abilities, then you have to look at which side is actually going to give you that. And in this election, it's the side of blue, it's the Democrats. See, this election isn't about which side do you choose. Are you a Republican or are you a Democrat? It's are you for the country or against the country? If you're against the country, you vote red. If you're for the country, you vote blue. That's really what it is. That's the breakdown of it. I want to show you something because in the first portion of the book, starting, it's on page 43 of the Project 2025. Um, you know what? We're not going to go to that. So, stepping back 1 minute, one of the biggest problems with the concept of Christian nationalism is they forget that they too are sinners. And so they want to put everybody else in front of them as the bad guy, but really the bad guy are the people who are out there promoting hate. Anytime somebody talks hate, they're not for God. There's no Jesus in anything that they're teaching. So you've got to be willing to walk away from that. Often falsely believe they are not daily sinners. So they will say to you, I don't sin every day. Well, yeah, you do. Whether it's in your thought, whether it's something that you say, yeah, you do. Like when you start getting into that place of self-righteousness, it's destructive across the board. When you start to look at yourself and believe that you are more than what you are, which is why the Bible tells us don't think more of yourself than you ought to. When you start thinking that way, what you become is someone who is poisoned against what God loves the most, and that's his people. They have a distorted view of the Father and Jesus. You see, for you to be able to stand up and say that the Father has hatred for anyone, okay, let me go back to that. Yes, God has some people that he doesn't like, but it is not based on the color. It's based on the condition of their heart. You see, we don't like to hear this, but let's be real. There are some people whose hearts are far beyond saving. There are some people who have angered the Holy Spirit and he will not save them. You see, you can sin against the Father, you can sin against the Son. You can speak against the Father and speak against the Son and be fine. But if you blaspheme the Holy Spirit, you'll never, ever, ever be saved. Ever. Ever. And there are some people who are like that. When you don't value the gift that you've been given, it's not uncommon for God to want to separate himself from you. To think that this group has the support of the Father is to understand mistakenly whose side he's actually on. So when you see Jesus standing behind Trump, that's called a figment of your imagination because Jesus is not standing in that position. Absolutely not. And anyone who calls themselves the C word, that Christian word, and they believe that, that's not a person who reads the Bible. It's inconsistent with what the Bible teaches. You can't be out there complaining and calling people out of their name, talking about how nasty someone is, and think that Jesus is standing behind you. He does not. The belief that the Father is accepting of bad behavior, we talked about. The Father doesn't clearly communicate his thoughts and ideas. Listen, God does not have a problem telling you what he thinks and doesn't think, even in this day and age, and even of the outside of the Bible. There was this pastor. I can't remember where he was, and he talked about a certain lifestyle. Okay, that lifestyle, by biblical definition, is an abomination. And he said something about how the Bible accepts it. Da 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 da. Within seconds, that church was struck with lightning and burned to the ground. God does not have a problem communicating what he thinks. Whether he chooses to do so or not, nobody can tell you what those circumstances are. But in that set of circumstances, he had no problems. I want you to understand what the founding fathers actually created this world for, or this country called America for. I want you to remember that when the founding fathers first got here, they had come from Europe. And if I'm not mistaken, the King of England is still the head of the church. And so they wanted a separation of church and state because they didn't want this Bible believing specificity passed down or forced on them like it had been while they were in England. They wanted the freedom to practice and believe and worship the way that they wanted to worship. Interestingly, was good in theory, but we would have to really look at the level of pride that was behind it when it started. And we can tell by the creation of the United States that the pride probably was not at the forefront, because one of the things that happens with God is when you are powered solely by pride, he often destroys it before it has the opportunity to really grow. And that's something that's really fascinating, like a safeguard that he put in place to make sure that his people never get too far out of their britches so he can reel them back in, teach them what they need to know, and then let them back out again. Reel them back in and let them back out. But at the core of every government, every successful governing country is the family. You see, the family is always before the government. The government is in business to ensure that the family can always stay together. Now, things have twisted in our country and gone a different direction. But what I want you to understand is that the solidarity of the family is most important. And sadly, at this point, the blue side is the one that genuinely understands that family is family. You see, little kids, they don't know anything that they are not taught. Everything they know, everything they experience is something that an adult teaches them. So when you have a child who ends up believing that they're never going to amount to anything, it's because they had a parent or a guardian who taught them that. When you have children who think that they can do all things, it's because a parent or a guardian taught them that. So I want to show you a little clip. It's about 2 minutes or so of what the government actually looked like when it first began, just to give you a refresher.
Until the very end. Anything you say, King, it's okay, King. You know it's kind of scary on your own. Gonna build a new land the way we planned. Could you help us run it till it's grown? They planted corn, you know, they built their houses one by one. And bit by bit they worked until the colonies were done. They looked around, yeah, up and down, and someone said, hooray! If the king could only see us now, he would be proud of us today. They knew that now they'd run their own land. But George III still vowed he'd rule them to the end. Anything I say, do it my way now. Anything I say, do it my way. Don't you get to feeling independent, 'cause I'm gonna force you to obey. He taxed their property, he didn't give them any choice. And back in England, he didn't give them any voice. They knew the time had come for them to take command. It's very clear you're being unfair, King. No matter what you say, we won't obey. Gonna hold a revolution now, King, and we're gonna run it all away with no more king.
We're gonna elect a president.
No more king.
He's gonna do what the people want.
No more king.
We're gonna run things our way.
No more king.
Nobody's gonna tell us what to do.
Now, that did demonstrate a little bit of pride, but the fact of the matter is that what they were doing, if you saw the end, they were put in a position where they were being left broke, incapable of buying the supplies they need, of having what they needed, and having no options. And so they came here, they created their own way, and then they were so determined to do it this way that they never quit and they never gave up. So, to think for any reason that the government of the United States is designed to control its people is a misunderstanding of American history. At no point in time was this country designed so that the government would have control. What it was designed for was to do the will of the people. And whenever government reaches a place that it is not doing the will of the people, it's out of line. And it's not in line with American values at all. So, I want to take you to page 43 of the Project 2025 Mandate for Leadership, because the plan is to move all power to the presidency, making ineffective our three branch government system. So, let me pull up that clip so that you can see that. The president who is willing to lead will find in the executive office of the president, EOP, the levers necessary to reverse this trend and impose a sound direction for the nation on the federal bureaucracy. The effectiveness of those EOP levers depends on the fundamental premise that it is the president's agenda that should matter to the departments and agencies that operate under his constitutional authority, and that, as a general matter, it is the president's chosen advisors who have the best sense of the president's aims and intentions, both with respect to the policies he intends to enact and with respect to the interests that must be secured to govern successfully on behalf of the American people. You can't take away the three branches of government because you have effectively killed America and what it stands for. And that plan shows you exactly what it is they're looking to do. And so, on that note, I'm going to go ahead and close up for the night because I want you to understand and have time to really absorb what is contained in this video, because I know it's probably pretty heavy. This country is about people having choice and freedom. And there's a group who wants to take that away. They want to make sure that not everybody has access to all things. But there's one thing that I really want to drive home for you, because they keep talking about how, oh, free and reduced lunch, and that's black and brown people who are affected by that, and that's this and that's that. Let me explain something. As a black person, there has never been a time in my life that I qualified for free lunch. Free or reduced, we never qualified for. We had a household that made too much money, even back in the 70s. However, one of the young men who works for me is not black and he's not brown. He's white. And he was on free and free lunch his entire school year. The irony is that the majority of people I know on free lunch are always white. You see, this is what we look at. This is where the problem comes in, because they become what's called collateral damage. I'm after this group of people, but I'm not paying attention to the damage that I'm doing to this group of people over here. It's very frustrating. When you look at these things, stop looking at them as though it's a color issue. It's a people issue. It's a people issue. And people who grew up in abusive households, we can sit back until the days end and say, well, they could have learned. They could have. Who would have taught them that they could learn? Someone has to teach you that you can do better in order for you to know that you are better and can do better. And so on that, I'm going to leave you for this week. I will see you next Wednesday, and I hope you have a wonderful week. If you are looking to download Project 2025, you can always go to our website. We'll link it into the description. We'll put a link to it in the description. I think there might be a problem with the audiobook, but I know that the team is working diligently to get that back up and going. So thank you so very much for your time. I'll see you next time.